Hi, I'm Assam, the lecturer here at the Institute of Medical Education, and today we're going to take a look at solutions to Section 3 of ACER's GAMSAT Pink Booklet, Practice Test 3, specifically Unit 34, questions 94 to 98. And this unit, we're going to take a look at celiac disease. And celiac disease is actually not well understood because many people actually can't differentiate between celiac disease and Crohn's disease. I mean, the main difference is that we kind of know how celiac disease works. Crohn's disease, we kind of don't know. But we've been given this massive passage in this unit about the pathophysiology or the theory as to how celiac disease developed. I can tell you right now, you don't have to read all of that in the GAMSAT. There is a little trick you can use to avoid having to read all of that text. But we're also given some additional information with some data for the sensitivity and specificity of the tests for celiac disease. So there's 4 different methods, but we can get to that in the second half of this unit. So the first half, I think it's just important to note, if you see something that massive in the unit or in the exam, usually you think, oh wow, I thought this, it looks like, I've written it here, it looks like a section 1 passage because you have to comprehend what's going on. But I mean, look, what I would do in this instance is, if we take a look at question 94, is I would just go take a look at the options available for the answers. So it says, question 94, which of the following best explains the occurrence of celiac disease? Now, it's important to note we're trying to look for what causes celiac disease. So that's the key, that's the crux of this question. What causes celiac disease? So let's take a look at 94A. It says raised levels of intracellular TTG, which is transglutaminase. So it's an enzyme that's epithelial cells release this enzyme in response. So if we take a look at dot point 3 in the unit stimulus, it says that TTG, it's an enzyme released by epithelial cells in response to gluten peptides that have leaked through your intestinal wall. So we know that straight away, TTG isn't the cause of celiac disease. It occurs because of the fact that our intestine is permeable to gluten peptides. And if you take a look back at the paragraph just before, it says that people with celiac disease, the intestinal wall is permeable so that peptides are not retained within the gut, but can leak across the lining where they stimulate an immune response. So straight away, we've got our sequence of events. We have, I mean, you can go back to dot point 1, but you know straight away that gluten, it's not getting broken down properly. So what happens is it can leak into the intestinal wall, and therefore it can activate immune response, which is obviously caused by, if you take a further look at dot point 4, the TTG, which can modify gluten peptides to make it some sort of antigen so it can activate an immune response. So we know, therefore, that let's just take a look at B. B looks correct because A is occurring in response to B. C says abnormally functioning immune system. Technically speaking, it's not abnormal. It's a regular functioning immune system. We've got our antigen presented by the TTG. And if you form a complex of the HLA, DQ2, and DQ8, we form these complexes that allow us for the antigen to be presented, and then helper T lymphocytes cause this immune system response. It's not abnormal, it's a normal response. So that's why C is incorrect. And the last point says inability of some people to digest gluten. Well, D is incorrect because it doesn't explain the cause of celiac disease. Because just saying, oh, well, the reason why I have celiac disease is because I can't digest gluten, it doesn't answer why the symptoms or the pathophysiology of the disease. So we have to make sure we answer the question. It's saying, what explains the occurrence of CD? What's causing it? So the cause is leaky gut. It causes the release of intracellular TTG. They can form complexes with the HLA DQ2, DQ8, and that can form this antigen they can form antigen presenting cells, and that can stimulate helper T lymphocytes to activate an immune response. So we know, therefore, the answer, or the best answer there, is B. I mean, you didn't have to read all of that text. you could have just used some deductive reasoning. And if you looked at the questions first, notice that A is related to B, so TTG is related to B, and that C, yes, abnormal immune response. I mean, you could say it's a normal immune response anyway, but again, C is related to B. So they're all related to the fact that the intestine is permeable to gluten peptides. That's important. So question 95 now. So 95 to 98, it tells us here they refer to the additional information about the 4 methods for testing celiac disease. And this is what usually confuses a lot of students. So I've taught students different year groups at university, and sensitivity and specificity is what confuses students. And trying to understand what a true positive, false positive, true negative, false negative is, it kind of throws people off. But let's just take a quick look here. Sensitivity. So just note, sensitivity is your true positives, and they'd also take into account your false negatives. But the key to note is sensitivity indicates percentage of, so percentage of our true positive. True positive, if you take a list there, it says number of sick people correctly diagnosed as sick. So think about it. We want our test to be very sensitive. We want to identify as much people as we can with the disease. So if we say true positive, it means that our positive, so if the positive is we have celiac disease and negative is we don't have celiac disease, true positive means we've correctly identified somebody with celiac disease. So true positive is the percentage of, say, healthy people, sick people diagnosed as sick. Sick. So that's important to note. So just think about it logically. True positive. Positive is celiac disease, and it's true because you've identified the sick person as having a disease. So that's what sensitivity is telling us. It's a percentage of sick diagnosed as sick. Now, specificity is telling us is telling us true negative, and we're taking into account obviously the false positive. So it's giving us the percentage. So true negative, think about it. Negative means you don't have the disease. True negative means we've correctly said you don't have the disease. So true negative is healthy people diagnosed as healthy. So we can see that clearly. So if you look at sensitivity, remember, we want to make sure that our test is sensitive. If the test is sensitive, we can detect the disease. We want to make sure it's specific. We want to make sure that it's specific in such a way that we can correctly diagnose healthy people as healthy. So that's what it means by sensitivity and specificity. I mean, you can think about it logically. So that's the way I look at it. So don't confuse yourself with all these numbers and true positive, false negative, yada, yada, yada. Just think about it. The test has to be sensitive, so we're going to detect sick people. How specific is it? Can we detect people, can we diagnose people who are healthy as healthy? That's what we mean by specificity. So just also take note of the 4 options of true positive, true negative, false negative. So again, true positive, somebody as healthy. I mean, it says it there for you. They've been nice to tell it to you, but sometimes in the GAMSAT, that might not be nice. True positive, sick people correctly diagnosed as sick. So your result is true, that you're positive for celiac disease. False positive, so think about it. We've told you have celiac disease, but you don't have celiac disease. So it's false. So that means we've told a healthy person that they're sick, but they're not. True negative, we've told you that you're healthy, and it's true. So we told you you don't have celiac disease, so you're negative, and it's true. Whereas false negative is we've told you that you don't have celiac disease, but you actually do. You're actually sick. So you just have to wrap your head around that, because in other GAMSAT exams, they might not be nice to give you these answers. So 2 points to note. We do take into account false negative for sensitivity and false positive for specificity. What that means is, if we take a look at the table and the equation or the formula there, It means if we were to decrease, so for example, if we were to increase false negatives, that means we decrease sensitivity. So a large false negative means we have decreased sensitivity. And if we have a large false positive, we have decreased specificity. So keep that in mind. So what that means is, if we have a large amount of false negatives, so the number of sick people incorrectly diagnosed as healthy, so that makes sense, our sensitivity is going to decrease. Same thing here, our specificity will decrease if we have a high number of healthy people incorrectly diagnosed as sick. Now, enough of this, let's dive into the question. So question 95 says, specificity indicates the percentage of. So we just went through this. So specificity indicates the percentage of healthy people diagnosed as healthy. So the answer for 95 is, if we take a look through the list, D. You might have incorrectly said something to do with the false positives, but that's not what it's telling us. What specificity is actually telling us is our true negative ratio, so the percentage of our true negatives. That's what you're going to take into account. So it's telling us the percentage of healthy diagnosed as healthy. It's not telling us, because you might have incorrectly said, well, false positive. So you would have said number of healthy people incorrectly diagnosed as sick. You would have probably said B. So a lot of students would have either said B or D. So obviously not C or A. But the reason why it's not B is because it's specificity. We want to know if this test is specific. So if we want to test the percentage of healthy diagnosed as healthy. So that's why B is incorrect. So if we take a look now at question 95, I don't want to remove this actually, it's got a toolbar. Let's look at 96. So take a look at question 96. It says, of the following, which two methods produce the most false negatives and false positives, respectively? So remember, let's take it into two parts. So false negatives. So to have a lot of false negatives, you have to have decreased sensitivity. So of the options available, we've got zonulin, HLA DQ8, and HLA DQ2. So we don't have to look at anti-TTG antibodies. So if we want to have the most false negatives, we have to have the lowest sensitivity. So of the list, the lowest sensitivity is HLA DQ8. So therefore, the answer has to be A or D. So we can cross out these two. So it's going to be A or D because we know it's HLA-DQ8. So for most false negatives, so false positives has to have the lowest specificity. So therefore, if we take a look at specificity, the lowest specificity there is zonulin. So it's 30%. So therefore, the answer has to be HLA-DQ8 and zonulin, so A. So that was nice and easy. So now let's look at question 97. Actually, no, we'll probably remove it this way. So 97 asks us, compared with HLA-DQ2, HLA-DQ8 diagnoses a greater proportion of. So HLA-DQ8, let's take a look, and DQ2. So higher proportion. So it's going to be, we see that HLA-DQ8 has a lower sensitivity, which means that it's definitely going to have, if it has a lower sensitivity, it has a higher false negatives. So straight away, you know it has a higher proportion of false negatives. But if you want to look at specificity, you see that HDQ8 has a higher specificity, which means it has lower false positives, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for HLA-DQ8 has a higher proportion of what? It definitely has a higher proportion of false negatives, and we know that false negatives is number of sick people incorrectly diagnosed as healthy. So that best option is going to be D, where it says the people with CD as not having disease. So it's a false negative. So that's why the answer for 97 has to be D. So if we take a look at 98, I think it's actually exactly the same, lucky you. 98 is exactly the same. It asks, compared with using zonulin, using anti-TTG antibody identifies a greater proportion of, if you take a look at zonulin and anti-TTG, we see that again, just like the other option. So we see that just like the other option, so where DQ8 had a lower sensitivity, is exactly the same thing. DQ8, anti-TTG has a lower sensitivity than zonulin. If it has a lower sensitivity, therefore it has greater amount of false negatives. Therefore, it's a number of sick people incorrectly diagnosed as healthy. So the answer for 98 again has to be D. The number of the people with Crohn's disease, oh sorry, not Crohn's, celiac disease, as not having disease. So that's why 98 is also going to be D. So this unit, it is a bit tricky to wrap your head around what sensitivity is and what specificity is, and how to understand how to read these ratios and these formulae. However, I guess now is the time to brush up on your sensitivities, specificities, and try to understand some of these diseases and their pathophysiologies, because it would have helped before you sat this exam. You would have known straight away what causes Crohn's disease, celiac disease. I keep saying Crohn's, celiac disease, and how we can actually read these different types of tests and their specificities and sensitivities. Now, if you're still having difficulty with this unit, you can post your queries or comments in the comment section below, or you can contact us directly. We'd love to help. Thanks for your time. Bye now.